so many people had to put their lives on hold, had to give everything they had into making this film for years. You know what I mean? And this is a film by all of us. This is all our film. Because if one person didn't do their job right, it would have been shit. You know what I mean?
Hello, my name is Michael Stütz, and I'm the head of the Panorama section of the Berlin International Film Festival. And today I'm very happy to welcome the Argentinian-Lebanese filmmaker George Peter Barbari with his film Death of a Virgin and a Sin of Not Living. Hello, George. Welcome.
Hey, Michael.
Such a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Let's go right into the questions. First question, maybe you can introduce your film, the essence of it, in a few sentences first.
Okay, so basically, I would say that my film, on the surface, is about four boys who go to visit a prostitute for the first time. But that is kind of like just the plot that drives the story forward. Underneath this layer, we have kind of the existential struggle that these boys are facing and that they find themselves in, especially when they find themselves in a situation as new and as difficult as being thrown into you having to perform with a prostitute and kind of not knowing how to, and you being kind of forced into this position because if you don't go, you will be shunned as kind of a person who's not man enough, you know what I mean, to go and take this step into manhood, basically.
مش عارف حالي شو عم بعمل. هالسنة رح بلش اشرب كل يوم. رح بلش بكم قنينة بيرة بالنهار وشوي شوي رح يزيدوا. بعد كم سنة رح صير مدمن على الفري بيز وارجع بلش بالتجارة. رح وقف كل شي من بعد ما تموت امي. اخر جملة بتقلي اياها: ما تخرب حياتك بايدك يا ابني. عن جد. بال36 رح ارجع بلش شرب. رح ضل فكر انه اهم شي الواحد يعيش حياته على انه يجرب يعمل منها شي. رح ضل اتفادى حيالله نوع من المسؤولية ورح ضل اتعاطى كل شي بيساعدني اهرب من الواقع. ع 43 رح موت اوفردوز بذات التخت اللي ماتت فيه امي. ما رح يقدروا يحددوا سبب الاوفردوز. بحس انه كان في كتير من كل شي.
ليك شوف التيابة ظابطين؟
جون بول دي ربك بلا سخافات، وصلنا لاخر هم تيابك.
خلص اسكت.
يا حي واقفة برا، هلا أنا بحكي معها.
Exactly this sort of second level that you just mentioned of the film, besides the driving plot that you have, you know, that it operates on so many different levels, you know, it looks deeply into sort of the contradictions, you know, of personalities, but also I would almost call it also that you're also seeking maybe a completion of these characters with the voiceovers that you present, which are, of course, more in an existential way. And as you said already, sort of the pressure of performance, you know, of masculinity, and all these kinds of different kind of elements that come together here. Maybe you can also tell us a little bit how you found your structure in the script, you know, how to present these sort of contradictions or completions of all these characters.
Okay. So basically, I knew I wanted to make this film. I wanted to make a film about this topic. It's something I went through, and it kind of shook me when I went through it. And I was very young when I went through it, and then like 10 years later, I realized like, wow, that's still with me. You know what I mean? And it had such an impact and took such a toll on me as a human being. And basically, it made me, like, that moment made me, you know what I mean? You go in and it's a prostitute, but then when you actually go in, oh, it's actually a human being. It's not just a prostitute. It's a woman, it's a mother, it's a daughter, it's a person just like struggling to make it through the same way you are. And even, I mean, in more severe circumstances. So that kind of, that feeling lingered, and that's what kind of like what stayed with me throughout all those years. And basically, when I wanted to make the film, I figured, and I had so many, and I wrote the story, and I had all these characters in the story, and I realized that, I mean, they're all people too. You know what I mean? These people that we encounter on the everyday, they're also human beings with their own struggle and with their own issues, and who are gonna live and go through shit and eventually die in a very peculiar way. But we're all gonna taste the same end, basically.
جون بول، يا جون بول،
ايش بك؟
هذا مش بالتم، ايه من تحت.
روح اسكت واطلع يلا. شيله من تمك. ليك ايش بعمل؟
تفرج عليه برج ايش بدك تعمل؟
ايه بعد لكن تفرج يعني؟
يعني انت مش شايفك كشف لك ايه؟
For me, it was very interesting because it had a very universal touch. You know, it's certain, as I said, you know, it's sort of an existential kind of humane reflection on life. At the same time, besides these sort of very universal matters and themes, it also, of course, opens up sort of a very specific look into a specific culture as well, in a sense. So I was wondering about how important was it for you also to sort of paint an image of Lebanese society?
So it was so important. I'm glad you asked this question. We're placed on the map as our our politics govern who we are as a people. You know what I mean? And that's so far away from the truth, right? I mean, because we're a very open society in Lebanon, and we're living in kind of a paradox and a dichotomy because we're very open. As I don't know if people are not really familiar with this, but Beirut is a huge city, is a vibrant city. Everything is allowed, you know what I mean? Our war is struggling for our identity because we're living in such a closed mind, kind of like a closed-minded yet open-minded society. I mean, we don't even understand ourselves in a way. So that's what we're struggling to find, and that's what I want to portray Lebanon as. Like, we go through the same issues as everybody else, and we still have our own issues, and we still have our own way of living. But the struggles we face are very universal, and that's why I feel like, I mean, I was so sick of seeing Lebanon portrayed in that sense and only in that sense, you know what I mean? Because no one is showing what I live every day. You know what I mean? No one was showing the things I go through. No one was showing how I live, how I speak, what I do. You know what I mean? No one was showing that. And that made me so angry.
Maybe let's talk about the character of Etienne for a second. For me, and I think it's obvious that he's very much the center of the film. He's the beginning, he's the end, he's sort of also differs from the other boys to a certain extent. He's very observant, almost much more aware, you know, of the contradictions that he has within himself. So I just wanted to ask, was he sort of the starting point for you writing the script or the idea?
I mean, it kind of stems from, Etienne is kind of based on me in a way, you know what I mean? Because his quietness is basically a reflection of the inability to be open about who you are and what you feel, because it diverges from the norm in Lebanon. Because it is a very masculine society, you know what I mean? Being sensitive is portrayed as kind of being, you know what I mean, being gay, being a pussy, being like, you know what I mean? And you have to be a man, you have to go, you have to go to the prostitutes, you have to be you have to drink the most, you have to do everything, you have to smoke, you have to do everything, you know what I mean? So, and that's kind of what the film is based on, basically, that inability to let it out.
I was also interested about how important sort of the setting of the locations, because obviously it's almost like a road movie. We travel most of the time with them back and forth. So I was interested how important the locations were for you, or you mentioned sort of it was shot where you lived or grew up.
Yeah, exactly. So I live above the pharmacy where they come to, you know what I mean? So I grew up here. The location is very important. It's very important. It's a lot to do with the film, just because, I mean, it's a beautiful place, and I grew up in such a beautiful place. But at the same time, the restrictions we face existentially and kind of the closed-mindedness that we have to go through is kind of, they contradict themselves. You know what I mean? So we have this beautiful sea, and it's so open, and I see it every day. But at the same time, I can't be who I want to be. I can't say what I want to say. So kind of, I wanted that kind of to play a part in driving the story forward.
Yeah. Which kind of brings me to the photography of the films. We talked just about the locations, you know, very sun-filled, they're very open, there's a lot of blue, there's a lot of water, sort of. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your collaboration with your director of photography and what you wanted kind of to convey on the level of the images.
Okay, so our relationship, I mean, we're very close as friends as well, me and my cinematographer. And he was the first person kind of to get on the film before anyone else. He was like the first person I approached. And I always, the first thing I mentioned to him was, I want the camera to be the fifth person on the journey with the boys. You know what I mean? I want the viewer to feel like you're there with them. The area where I live is a beautiful place. So I wanted to portray that beauty, you know what I mean? And it's a very ugly thing to have to hide who you are. You know what I mean? And I kind of wanted that contradiction. I wanted you to see, I wanted the viewer to see and to feel where we're living, but at the same time to feel the suffocation that I mean the protagonist is going through, that many people living in this country are going through.
Question about the shoot itself, the production. How much time did you have to shoot actually?
So this film was shot basically on a very no budget type, a very small budget type thing, and we had it was a 10-day shoot basically, and it was kind of like 7 days, but 3 days prep and 7 days of shooting. It was extremely difficult to shoot this film. I don't know, it's my first film, so I'm not sure how difficult the rest will be, but I mean, I can safely say that it was a challenge, and the beautiful part about it was that we would get it every time. You know what I mean? We'd get the take every time. It would be the best acting, the best lighting, the best everything, and we'd get it every time.
Maybe let's talk about a little bit also about the, you know, collaborative nature of the medium. You just mentioned, you know, in a very close relationship with the director of photography, and so I was also interested how you found your actors. You casted them yourself, correct?
So I casted everybody in the film myself, and so my actors. So I've been working with my actors for 4 years, for like 3-4 years before we shot the film. So like kind of like you could say with the duration of the shooting of the film, it was a 4-year process. So I wanted to make this film, and these guys are basically kind of like the crazy guys of Batroun, of my town. You know what I mean? So Adnan, the guy who's taking the boys, he's the one, like, I grew up seeing this kid on the street, like, you know what I mean? Like all day, all night. And I was like, what a character. So like, he's the first person I thought of for this character. When I wrote this, I was like, he's going to play this character. And then Etienne is kind of that, it's kind of this, then they all kind of portray themselves in a way, you know what I mean? They all kind of fit that. So Etienne is that type of person. Jean-Paul is that type of person. I might have pushed it up a dose, but he's that. He's proud to be that type of person. You know, they weren't intimidated by any of that. They were just themselves. Like the camera would roll and they just have fun with it.
So the parts where they reflect on their own sort of, you know, life and their future and death in the end. So these were parts that were your writing. Did they sort of add to that as well throughout the process that you worked with them?
Those stories are based on real people.
Okay.
So the story of Etienne's mother is the actual story of Etienne's mother. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? She was gracious enough. I mean, I spoke to her before, and because I found her story to be very beautiful and very touching. You know what I mean? She lost her husband the way she did, and that gives such a layer to Etienne's, who he is as a human being. You know what I mean? Having been through that, having lost his father at such a young age, kind of makes him who he is. And I asked him his permission. Is that okay with you if I was to use your actual story? And I spoke to his mother and I asked her, and they were both fine with it, and they're both very supportive. I mean, actually, that's the house where we shot the film. That's Etienne's house.
Their house.
That's his actual room.
Besides directing, writing, and casting, as we just spoke about, you also edited the film yourself. So just coming from what we talked about, now all the collaborative nature, you know, that of making a film, you know, then the next step, sort of going into the editing room, locking yourself into the dark, and then deciding what goes in and what doesn't. You know, maybe you can tell us a little bit about that process, and was that sort of the most challenging part of making the film?
Definitely. And the weird part was that I thought it was going to be the easiest part. You know, like I have my takes, I have like, you know, long takes, right after each other. You know what I mean? We're done. And then you get into the editing room and it's like, you put it together and you're like, it's not good. You know what I mean? It's not as good as you thought it would be. So you have to fix it. We also had a consultant on board, Cyril Basile. He's also a beautiful person, helped so much. And they come in and they tell you, like, this is not working. I know this is what you think. This is what you had in mind. Let's try something else. How about trying this and this and this? And then you do, and it just takes the film somewhere so much better and so much more real than you could have ever have thought. You know what I mean? Thought about yourself. So I feel like that's the thing about filmmaking, and like you keep mentioning that it's such a collaborative process, and I agree completely. So many people had to put their lives on hold, had to give everything they had into making this film for years. You know what I mean? And this is a film by all of us. This is all our film. Because if one person didn't do their job right, it would have been shit. You know what I mean? But when people come and they put their heart into it, you know what I mean? And their experiences and what they've been through, and that kind of resonates in the decisions they make, and they tell you, change this, it's not working. And because you love them, and because you trust them, and you do, and you try it, it makes the film so much better.
When Etienne and his friends, when they arrive at the house where they're supposed to having sex with a young woman named Christelle. That specific scene with Etienne and Christelle, which is, there's so much vulnerability and there's so much complexity in there. And I was just curious how challenging it was to shoot that scene and how you prepared for that also with the two actors.
I cast Christelle the day before I started shooting the film. And her scene, this scene in the room, was the third day of shoot. I didn't want to rehearse that scene with Etienne and her. And then Etienne came and and Fayrouz was kind of like in character the whole time. Obviously, she's kind of a very method actor type person. And then she kept, between takes, she would sit Etienne down and she would tell her her backstory. And she would tell her what she went through as the character. And it was so beautiful to see Etienne, who was like this manly guy, you know what I mean? Manly, sensitive guy, but he's a big guy. He's just sitting on the bed like this, you know what I mean? With his legs dangling, and he's like listening to Christelle, telling him a story. And it was just, you know what I mean? You don't, sometimes like you're a part of something and you don't believe that this is happening. You know what I mean? Like you're so thankful to be a part of it. Like, I'm just thankful I was able to be in that room, holding that monitor and see that scene being kind of carried out in front of me and feel that energy, you know what I mean? Because there was an energy in that room that I found that, I mean, like, that I haven't experienced ever in my life. And that kind of was like because that, when I think about that scene, it reminds me why I want to make films for the rest of my life.
Last question. I mean, okay, this is your first feature-length film, incredible film. We're super honored to have it here in the program. And to be honest, we can't wait to share it with the world, you know, and I hope, you know, soon there will be, you know, audiences in the flesh also being there and being able to talk about the film with you and us here. Thank you so much for taking the time and for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your openness and your wonderful answers. And we'll see you soon.
Hopefully. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, George.
Bye.
Ciao.